In this video I'll be installing a mod chip into this Nintendo Switch so you can download custom firmware and custom software on it. I have the console partly disassembled already with the screws out, so I'm going to skip all that as I don't see the need to show that in this video. But if you do need that, I can make a separate video. So I'm just going to jump to the console open and with the heat shield off. So now we're here. First thing we'll do is disconnect the battery because you don't want any power flowing through this. Now we need to get to this part here under the shields where we need to do some solder work. So the first thing we're going to do is remove this heat sink. There's just 3 Phillips screws holding that on. Now we'll lift this up. And you can try and save the sponge, it doesn't really make a difference to be honest. You can use a bit of heat and some isopropyl alcohol and try to get this off. Normally I just kind of slice it a bit, but just for this video I'll just show using a bit of heat to see if it works better. Obviously you don't want to use too much, otherwise you'll just shrivel up that sponge. Yeah, throw a bit more isopropyl alcohol in that to help dissolve that adhesive. So that's that part off. Now we just need to get this sponge off here now. So we'll use a bit more heat on that just. There you go, that's the sponge off and intact. But as I say, that's just personal preference, there's no need to do that. And nobody would look at the sponge tour and be like, oh, it's a bad job. Just that they know somebody's been at this. So I'm going to clean off this old thermal paste before I continue. Just going to scrape off the majority of it here. I'll do this off the desk actually. And the same with the heatsink itself. Now with that all cleaned, next thing we'll do is we will remove that emmc here. So just use a bit of isopropyl alcohol again here actually, because you don't need to take off this metal shield with it. See that metal shield over the Wi-Fi chip in that wee area? You don't need to take that off, and it's pretty stuck on there with adhesive. So just use a bit of isopropyl alcohol to help soften that adhesive. And sure, look, it's come off already. That's how easy it is to come off. But we don't want that metal part off, so we'll just use a wee thin tool here to just slice through that adhesive there. There we go. So I'm going to put this metal shield back on here. And all we want is this part here. Let me just remove that old adhesive and sponge. Okay, so we're going to use that later for our chip. Now we need to remove this heat shield over the CPU and the RAM. It can be a little tricky to get off. You'll see there's little points here. Well, you can kind of see where there's a gap here and here, all those places. You need to try and get your tweezers in and pull this little bit of the heat shield over that lip there that's poking out. There's a few different ways to do this. I find not the one way works every time because it just depends. Sometimes you can kind of try and push that bit of lip in like that, or you can kind of try and get the tweezers in and lift it out over it. You'll find yourself it's a bit tricky, so just do whatever works for you. Obviously these aren't the best tweezers I have because this can generally fuck up your tweezers when you're doing this. Be careful as well, you don't put too much pressure, because then if it shoots off and the tweezers could take off a component here and then you're left with a dead switch. There we go, that's that finally off. So again, we're going to clean off this thermal paste so we can work in this area, and then we'll apply more when we're done. So be very careful around this because you don't want to damage any of those capacitors. And so I'm just gently cleaning it here. I'm not really putting much pressure on. Just letting the isopropyl alcohol do the work. I'm just going to very gently with my spudger here just run around run around that die in the middle, just to help lift some of that really bulked up thermal paste, just to kind of shift it a bit so I can get it away with the cotton bud a bit easier. Alright, most of that gone. I'm just going to very gently scrub with a toothbrush here, just to clean in between those capacitors, because I'll need to get in between those to do a bit of soldering in a minute. Like, I'm not even pushing down on this toothbrush, I'm just literally letting the weight of the toothbrush run over and back, just to tidy up the area a bit. So that's what it looks like there now. You can see the gaps in between the capacitors, which is what we'll need because I'll be soldering there. And then we'll just clean this too while we're here now. Okay, so we'll take out this mod chip now and we'll have a wee look at what we need to do here. The first thing you need to do is go on your computer and plug in the USB-C port on this. Hold the boot button here, the second one down, and plug us into your computer with the USB-C cable. You need to download a file. I'll try and link that in the description if I can find the right one. I think I might have found it through the Retro 6 website, but if I can get it up again, I'll link to it. And what you need to do is when you plug this into your computer, hold the boot button, plug it into your computer. It'll be recognized as a storage device. Just all you have to do is move this file I linked to into the folder on this. It'll shut itself down after say about 10 seconds. Unplug it from your computer and this thing's got the firmware it needs to run on this switch. Then that's all you need to do for that part. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'm going to jump back to this video, but I'll not bother showing it because it's pretty self-explanatory that way. Okay, so this switch is the V2, which means we'll use the little cable marked V2 to solder to this part here, because the capacitors are lined in a different orientation on the V1. This one, they're lined like that. On the V1, I believe they're like that, so the pads are in slightly different places on the other V1 cable. So make sure you're using the right cable. So I'm going to get the microscope out now, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tin the pads here to make it easier to solder to the CPU. So hopefully you can see that properly now. This is the pad that we'll be soldering to for the capacitors, SP1 and SP2. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tin these to make it easier to solder to the capacitors. So I'll get some flux on these. And I have my soldering iron set to about 300 degrees. Let's see how that goes first. So that's the two of those tin there now. So now we need to solder to these two capacitors on the board here. Let me just get this lined up. The metal shields here, or not the metal shields, but see the metal tabs, 1, 2 and 3, they need to go under the metal of the CPU here. They need to sit under there because we'll be soldering them on later for stability. So let me just get this lined up like that and like that. Yeah, we're going to need a solder to these two horizontally placed. Well, they look vertical on this microscope now because of the way I have the switch, but the horizontally placed capacitors are the two that we'll be soldering to here. So that's underneath, that's underneath, that's underneath, and we'll be soldering to this and this. So you can do it either way. You can solder to the capacitors first, or you can solder one of these tabs in to hold everything in place. I might just do that. I might solder one of these tabs in, and that will help me work with the smaller pads a bit better. I'm just going to turn my fume extractor on here. So I'll just solder this one in place now. Now I'm going to go over that again later on with more heat, but I think that's enough for now just to keep it in place. You can see it hasn't really bonded to the metal well, but that's just because the heat's too low. But I'll just go ahead with this capacitor now first, and now that it has a bit of stability. I might actually turn the heat up just a little bit. Around 335 now. I might go over that again in a minute, but I'll just go on to the next one now. Let me just pull this into place a little bit better. There we go. Oops, there's a bit of flux in that. Now I'm just going to go over these again with a little bit more heat, say about 370 now, just because the tip's so small. I find it hard to get enough heat transfer there. So I'll increase the heat to 370 now. Okay, now that the capacitors are done, I'm just going to solder these tabs into place now and keep everything secure. And I'll go over that one we did before with a bit of extra heat now with that larger tip. There we go. Now there's no need to go over that one, just leave it the way it is. That's secure enough. So I'm going to clean this now with some IPA and cotton buds, just to make it look a bit neater. Now don't put any pressure unless you don't want to lift anything up or damage anything, so just letting the weight of the cotton bud itself just brush over it and clean it up a bit. And the same with the toothbrush. Now I think we're done with the microscope for now. Now with that part done, I'm just going to give it a quick test here. So I'll get my chip, plug your emmc into the chip like that. Now the way you do this is open the tab, flap on this connector, connect it in like that. Now this part isn't hard to do, I'm just making it look difficult. And with that done, plug this connector into where the emmc should go on the board. So plug it in there like that. Now I don't want to short anything out here, so I'm going to plug in the battery while holding the chip up, turn it on, and we'll see if we get anything on screen. There's you can tell by the lights if it's working or not, but I'll check on the screen. Do we get, yeah, perfect. We're getting the no SD card logo. So that means it's worked. So I'm going to turn this off now. Now we need to put some thermal paste on this and in here. But when we do it there as well, to put this back on, we need to lift up this flap here. This little tab, see this one here at the top? Sorry, here, when I'm poking out the tweezers, we need to bend that out to make room for that cable coming out of it. So just bend it out with a pair of pliers like that, it's fine. Now I'm going to get some thermal paste. I'm using Arctic MX4, but you can use whichever one you want. This is just the one I have in stock. So just put a blob on there. I'll just put a wee bit on there too, just. So lift up this part of the chip with the emmc. And put this back down like that. And I'll just sit back on like that. So now that's in place, we can put some thermal paste on our heatsink again. There and there. And replace that as well. No, I just like to put it, it's not, I don't think it's necessary, but I like to put a little bit of Captain tape here just to stop anything from shorting out there. I don't think anything can, but just for safety's sake, I like to do it anyway. So just a bit of tape there like that. Now the heat shield, before it goes back on, it needs to have a space cut out for this mod chip, so about down here and down here, you need to cut out enough space for this. So I'm just going to do that now. I'm not going to bother showing that because everyone has their own way of doing it. You can snip it or grind it, whatever you want to do. Now I've kind of overestimated the size I needed there, but it's no problem. It's no big deal, it doesn't matter anyway. I'll just put a bit of Captain tape over it there just to protect that circuit board and everything. Just a bit of Captain tape in here to be fine, look, just like that. So we can replace the battery, screw our heat shield back on. Now when you are doing this, probably a good way to remember it is that screw post there, just cut beside that. I don't know what I was thinking going that far, but as I say, it's no big deal. I'm just going to put some Captain tape over that as well, just to keep everything in place. So I'll just do a bit there, so just a bit like that. And another piece just below that. And then again, like that. Perfect. Now we just need to reinstall the SD card reader and we can get the back on this. Now with everything back together, we can just test this for one last time now. And see, does it give us the, yep, no SD card logo. You see the picofly logo there. So that's worked there now. I know this SD card doesn't have anything on it and the switch needed to be updated to support that card, but we'll just try this here now, hold on. Failed to obtain, yeah, so it is actually reading that SD card. It's just not getting the files it needs off it. So I'm going to end the video here now, just a wee short video, hopefully explaining how to install a mod chip on a V1, V2 switch using one of those RP2040 picofly chips, which are pretty cheap to get now. So it's a handy wee thing to do if you're good at microsoldering. But yeah, thank you for watching and I hope that was helpful.